Peekaboo. It's a baby sweater. We're going to knit up a baby sweater for ages 6 to 24 months today on GoodKnit Kisses. Welcome to GoodKnit Kisses. We're all about helping you stitch your love and love your stitches. Our pattern and yarn today is provided by Lion Brand Yarns for the Loom Knit Baby Sweater. Thank you so much, Lion Brand. We're using Heartland from Lion Brand. This is a medium 4-weight yarn. For color A, you need 2 to 3 balls. This is Great Smoky Mountain. And color B, you need 1 ball. This is color Katma. For your loom today, you can use a 3/8 gauge loom, meaning the space between the pegs is 3/8 of a gauge, 3/8 of an inch. And I'm showing 2 different looms here because this pattern is the Martha Stewart knitting loom. However, if you don't have it or you would prefer to use something else, I want to show that you can use this all-in-one loom from Knitting Board or anything else that is 3/8 gauge. Let me show you the parts that you need if you use the Martha Stewart loom. It calls out the U-shaped piece, which is this one. And then these longest sides, these are 36 hole sides here. So you just place them in this configuration here. These extra gray pegs hold it together right here. And then this gray peg here is what you use as your starter. And then you place in as many of these pegs here in every hole for your small gauge. We're only using one side of it, and the rest of it is to keep it stable on the table for you. For notions, you're going to need your loom tool or hook, some scissors, a tapestry needle, a tape measure, some stitch markers, and extra pegs if you're using the Martha Stewart loom. On the stitch markers, I'm using 5 for the fronts of or the right sides of all my projects so that I know which sides of the seam to sew on, but you will definitely need 2 that are locking or opening for marking the sides of the arm for putting those on. So these are definitely in the pattern and you will need them. All right, so first you're going to want to download the free pattern down at the link below to our blog, and it will give you the link to this one, and you'll have to sign in for free, and it will give you a PDF. Once you click on this site here, you're going to click on free pattern download for the Loom Knit baby sweater. And this one, I recommend that you print it off, and you're going to want a highlighter handy, and that way you can mark sizes. So when we scroll down here, you can see that it comes in 4 different sizes. It's an easy skill level, and we've got a sweater from 6 months all the way to 24 months. If you've never done a pattern with multiple sizes, here's how you look at it. You're going to look at the size that you want. The 6-month comes right before the parentheses, and then you have 12-month, then 18, then 24 months. So whenever you see information with parentheses around it, the first one is going to correspond to the 6-month. The next one inside the parentheses is 12, and so on. So that's how you're going to look at that. Now, of course, it's got the materials for what I'm not using in the video today, which is Heartland. So we're just going to skip past that and see the blog for all that information. The gauge written is for their gauge that they got. I'll give you that later on in the video, but mine is different from this one. You're going to need more cast on in here. If you don't, you're going to get the wrong size of sweater, and that's important when you're making a wearable. Now, of course, I've told you in the beginning that where they're using the Martha Stewart loom, so this has information on that, or you can flip back to that part in the video to see how to set it up. But your amount of pegs will vary based upon what your cast on is. So you're going to need more stitches to cast on, more pegs to cast on if you've got smaller stitches the way I have. All right, so just to kind of go over the pattern here, you can see that it's got an area for back, and it talks about loom configuration and then how many pegs to set up, and then how to knit it up, and a diagram. The diagram is really the most important on here. We're working in garter stitch where you have a row of knit and a row of purl, and it goes back and forth the same way, and you're just basically making a square. So you cast on, knit a row, purl a row, repeat, and then bind off. So this square shape is what's really important, and especially these measurements down below, and that's how we figure out our cast on. But the only way you can do that is by making a sample, making a swatch like this one here. So you would knit up a sample, and then you would measure across and see how many stitches in 1 inch you get. I recommend making your fronts first, and I'll show you that in a moment. Okay, so here's your front. The front is the most narrow width on this pattern, so I suggest making that one first, and then if it's the right size for you, according to the numbers I'll give you, then you've already got the first one done. I'm jumping over to show you the samples because we've got the 5 pieces here, but I want you to see the front that I was just talking about. The front is going to be the most narrow width of any of the panel pieces. You can see the sleeves look about the same, except they're actually doubled over because they'll get stitched together and of course go around an arm, and it'll be an armhole right here. So you want to make one of these fronts first, and then you'll be able to measure it and make sure that you have the correct gauge so you can have the correct size of garment. So I'm going to take you in the next video on how to cast on, make the knit stitch, make the purl stitch, make your length, and then bind off, but also measuring gauge and even weaving in that tail. So if you don't know those parts, it's all going to be here in the video. What you need to know first is what my gauge was. I've got 5 stitches across in 1 inch. And so what I think that you will need to cast on for 6 inches is going to be 25 stitches. For the 12 month, you're going to cast on 26 stitches. For 18 month, 28. And for 24, 30 stitches. So once you have those cast on, you'll work all the rows until you get a complete panel, bind off, weave in your tail, and you will have a nice swatch to measure. If you knit up half the length and you think that's enough to measure your swatch, then you can do a provisional bind off with some scrap yarn. I talk about that a little bit in there, and you could take it off the loom, measure, and put it right back on the loom, or you can undo the work, frog it, or rip it out, and start a new one once you know your gauge. Don't worry, we've got a calculator to help you with that. All right. Move on in the video, and you'll see how to do those things. When we come back, I will go over the other cast-ons with you and learn how to seam this all up together. See you soon. A garter stitch panel is made up a series of knit rows and a purl row, and then alternated across all the way until the end. So we're going to go over the elements here. We're going to cast on, then make a knit row, a purl row, and then work alternating rows 1 and 2 all the way until your desired length, and then you bind off. All right, let's make this with the basic stitches. Grab your yarn and make a slip knot. I wrap mine around my finger twice. Pull the back loop over the front slightly. Do it again up and over the tip of your finger, and that makes a slip knot, or make it however you like. We're going to put it on the first peg here. Okay. And then we're going to wrap around the second peg once, and then one more time, and then we're going to lift the bottom loop over the top loop, and that peg is now cast on. Then you're just going to continue wrapping twice the next peg, lifting up and over to cast on, and continue all the way down until you get all the desired pegs. And this is a double E-wrap cast on. And to continue across, pause your video until you've gotten to the amount of pegs that you want, and we'll meet back up for the next row. And after the last peg is cast on, you're going to go back in the opposite direction, working your way around each peg with the U-knit stitch. So we're going to go around the front of that peg, wrap around, makes a U formation, and then just lift up and over and make that stitch nice and loose. You don't want to pull too tightly on it. And can go into the next peg and wrap around and lift up and over, making sure not to pull too tight. And if you think that you pull too tight when you go to the next one, you can always keep your loom hook behind there to hold it for you, and then wrap the next peg, and then hold it with your finger and lift up and over to knit that next stitch. All right, so continue going all the way down the row to the end, and when we meet back up, we'll work on the purl stitch. Okay, the end of our row, we're ready to start the purl row. Bring our yarn to the front, put it underneath the first stitch here. We're going to work in the opposite direction. I find that when I'm working a purl row, it's easier to work it from right to left, so it's nice if you have that option on a project. If you are left-handed, you might enjoy casting on from the opposite direction, so that when you get to the purl row, you can work to the right So this just has to do with holding the yarn. So we're going to put the yarn below the stitch, and we're going to scoop up with our loom hook. We're going to scoop up a new loop, and then take that old loop off, the old stitch off, and put on the new. And be careful not to pull too tight. And that's what you just continue to do. Put the yarn below the stitch, pull up a loop, take it off, and put it back on. Continue all the way down. So complete your purl row, and then repeat rows 1 and 2 to get garter ridges all the way up until you get your desired length. Pause your video and I'll meet you back at that point. See you soon. You'll want to measure your length, and if you're not quite sure because the stitches are very spread out and stretched, it's a great idea to do a provisional bind off, which is taking some extra scrap contrasting yarn through all of these pegs, taking it off the loom, and then measuring it. This is also where you can measure how many stitches per inch that you have, so you know how many stitches to cast on. You can also use one of these kinds of rulers here to measure. It's nice to have something kind of rigid, and then you can stick a tapestry needle in between the stitches to count them a little bit easier. All right, we're not going to do that here, but we are going to go into how to bind off. So how to bind off, you're just going to work the first 2 stitches in this direction to the right. So work 1 and 2, just knitting those stitches, and then pick that second stitch up and move it over to peg 1, lift up and over, and now you're going to move peg 1 onto this empty peg. And then now from here on out, you're just going to only knit the second peg, move it up and over to the first peg, and lift up, knitting that off, and move it to the empty peg. You're going to continue across this way, just working the second peg, moving it over, knitting it off, and then moving it to the empty. Continue until the very end. I'll meet you back up. Okay, so I've moved my last stitch over, knitting that off, and then I'm going to go ahead and work this stitch one more time, and then we're going to pull this one on through. Go ahead and cut your yarn, lift it off of the loom. And this part right here, it's going to end up stretching out. So let's just go ahead and kind of hand block that. And this project will get blocked at the very end, so I'm not going to worry about that part right now. Go ahead and weave in your ends. And as you can see, I've got the right side marked here because I want to make sure all my stitches are lined up when I do my seaming together. To weave in a tail on garter stitch, you're going to take your yarn tail to the back of your work and start weaving around these stitches and how they lay. If you look at these stitches closely on your own knitting, you're going to see that there are a bunch of what looks like little curves this way and that way, like little parentheses on top of each other. So if you think about it in an easy term, it's more like a smile at the bottom part and a top hat or an umbrella up top. I'm going to put my needle through one of them, and you can see this stitch here and how the one below it goes like a little smile underneath. So I'm going to lead my yarn up through here. So pretend that this contrasting yarn goes up. We're going to go underneath one of these little umbrellas. Okay. And then I'm going to move over to underneath where one of the little smiles are. Okay. We'll pull our yarn up through here. Okay. And then once that's nice and tight and tied in, we're going to follow this line here that looks like the umbrella. We're going to follow around it and go down in that stitch on the other side of it. So it looks like the yarn would come down in here. Then we want to go to the row back in the direction we came from, and we want to go back into one of these stitches here, so that when we come out, this is going to be the little umbrella part. When we come out, we're going to come down and around this direction, so you can see the yarn kind of moving around that way. So let's do that now. Pull that on through, and you can see how now it mimics where that stitch was. It's kind of a dark yarn, so now you can see this light yarn kind of covering around. So now we're going to mimic that little area here with a smile and come up through here and then zigzag back right where we came out that other time. And this is going to start giving this wavy look to it. By the time we get this next one in here, you'll see this come together. So we're going to go around, come out where we came down before, and it's going to start looking like that old-fashioned candy that zigzags around like this. So when you have it in the matching yarn, it won't be seen. You're just going to continue going down this direction. You can also come back on top of itself a couple of times and then snip it with your scissors. And when you cut it, just cut it about to here, so that when you block or wash your work, it'll start working its way down into there. Otherwise, if you cut it too short, it'll start popping out of the next stitch. And that is how you weave in a tail. Knitting gauge. It's what helps determine the size of your overall garment or project that you're working on. This one in particular, I've changed the yarn, and I'm not changing the gauge of the loom, but because the yarn is a little bit different size than my loom and I'm a different knitter, I need to make sure and knit the sample up to see if I need to change my cast on. So how I do that is I measured across 1 inch on the other side here. And when you measure across, you want to lay it down on a hard surface and then take your knitting gauge or tape measure, and you just measure across and count how many stitches are there. If you go right to the very middle, it's much easier. If your knitting is small, you can do just 1 inch across. If it's bigger, you can even test in 4 inches and then divide that by 4 to find out how many stitches per inch. So here I measured across just 1 to make it easy on camera here. And we're going to count across, and I've just marked it with some tapestry needles so you can really see it here. I know it's very dark yarn, but let's bear with me and let's see if we can count across here. So we've got 1, you see that little hump there, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's 5 stitches per inch. And I can take that 5 and look at my schematic and my drawing and know that maybe I need 5 inches across. And so I would just take my stitches per inch times how many inches I need, and that equals my cast on. If you need a little bit of help, here's a calculator for you. So we have the cast on calculator on our website. It's an interactive calculator, and you could put it in inches or centimeters. You don't even have to say which one. I'm working with 1 inch across, and then I put in my number of stitches, and you would put in your number of stitches, and then the project width. Now that's the width that you want it to be. So you would jump on over to the pattern and look at the schematic, the diagram, and see what size that you want it. And then you would put that in right there. And I know, let's say in this one, I want to do one that's 5 inches across, and then it automatically detects it down here. It says, let me do the math for you, and the numbers to cast on is 25. We even have a row calculator that's like that too. You can put in how many stitches are in, or how many rows are in your inch. You count downward, and let's say I had 13 rows in 1 inch. Whoops, I put in that I did it in 1 inch, and maybe I got 13 rows. And then I come down here and I say, well, I want this 6 inches. And then down here it says you need 78 rows to complete it in that gauge. So there you have it, and there's also more interactive calculators on the website. So that is how we got the cast on rows. Next, I'm going to show you how many you need for this project. All right, now you know how to make one panel. You can make all the rest of your panels. Let's go over the correct cast-ons. So you got your stitches per inch. Let me verify and show you what I've got. I've got 5 stitches in 11 rows per inch, and that is what my cast-ons over here reflect. So if you got 6 stitches per inch, then you would just multiply 6 times whatever these numbers are across. So any one of these to know the cast-ons for these particular parts. So you've got 1 back, 2 fronts, and 2 sleeves. So make another front if that was correct. Let's go over the cast-ons here. Now go ahead and write these down on your printed pattern from Lion Brand. The cast on for the back with this yarn in my gauge is 50 stitches. The next size is 53, 55, and 60. That's the cast on for the back. You just make one panel. For the fronts, again, we got 25 stitches for the smallest size, 26, 28, and 30. And make 2 of those. And then the sleeves, you'll make 2 of those. And the cast-ons are 35, 38, 40, and 45. And if you need that interactive calculator, don't forget it's down there and it will help you. It will also round up to the nearest number if you're using a regular calculator. If it's 0.5 stitches or more, then I just round up. If it's 0.25, I just round down. And that's really how I determine those numbers. And then you just work the panel until you get the desired length for the size called out. Once you've worked all 5 of your panels, you're ready to start seaming. You're going to need a wide-eyed tapestry needle and 2 stitch markers that open up, and that'll be showing you where to start and stop on certain seaming areas. I'm going to be showing it with a contrasting yarn so you can really see where those stitches go. And let's go over to the pattern here. The different things that you're going to need to do is in the finishing section, and they're all kind of jammed up together. So let's break this down. You're going to use your tapestry needle and sew the shoulder seams. And I've got to add some extra directions that are missing from here, so we'll go over that. Then you're placing markers in certain spots on the backs and the fronts and sewing between those markers for the sleeves. And that's actually the opening for the arms. It's the armhole. And then we're going to sew the sides and the sleeve seams. And then you can work in all your tails if you haven't done that already. And then do the blanket stitch trim. So you're going to grab your 2 fronts and your back and move the sleeves to the side. So let's do that now. I'm going to take my fronts of my right sides facing up and just put them to the side here. And then my back, make sure the right side is facing up. And now we've got the, this is the bind off row and the bind off row, and we're going to put those 2 together. So these will end up matching up here. Now we're only going to sew between, let me use this tapestry needle. We're only going to sew from the side inward halfway to where the front is here. So let's fold this in half and use one of our stitch markers and just mark here. You can also use a tape measure to be accurate. So we're going to be working to the midpoint of this front, and then the same thing for the second front. So we've marked those, and now we're going to sew. This is a mattress stitch, and if you've got a tail for one of these 2, you can work with your long tail. I went ahead and wove those in. I'm going to use the contrasting yarn so that you can really see where my stitches go. It's going to be hard to tell in this dark yarn if not. All right, so I'm going to take the first one on the left here and go ahead and come up through the stitches here. So just this, there's a little V stitch here. You pull all the way through and get a tail, and then I'm going to go back up through that same spot and attach. Okay, so that's nice and secure. I'm going to come over to the right and come up through the edge here. And these 2 stitches and attach. All right, so now we've got that secure. All right, now we want to come to the left side again, and on the on garter stitch you've got V stitches for the knit stitch running in one direction, and then you have the stitches running this direction with the rows here. But you can see when I pull this apart, you can see the little V stitch here. See the V? This stitch and this right here, these 2 stitches make up a little V. All right, so this is the bind off, so of course the V's are running in this direction. So we want to go underneath those 2 stitches of the V that make up the entire stitch. We're going to go under them and pull through our yarn. Okay, and you can leave it loose for now, that's fine. And then we're going to come over to the right side and find that one there as well. So we're going to go up right where we had this yarn coming out last time, put our needle down through, and we can see the V that's on this one. So it's going to be coming in this direction. And we're just going to go back underneath both of these stitches. We got 1, I know that's 1 stitch, and then I have the 2. They're just really close to each other right here. So go under here. Okay, and so now we've got that, and we're going to go back over to the other side and see where we came out. Okay, with this stitch here, you just go back down there and scoop under. We're going in between the bind off row and the row right before and of purl, and we're just lifting up that knit stitch. See the stitch there? It's facing the opposite direction. I can't even make my hand go that way. It's going to face like this. So we're going to scoop underneath there, go through both of those stitches, and then now we're going to zigzag over to the right. Okay, go back down where we came last time and go up and under, and you can see those stitches right there. And you're just working on the right side or tops of all these stitches. And what happens is when you pull those tight, it ends up making a seam that hides back behind it like that. So let's do one more and then we'll pull it. Go back over to the other side, go down where you came up last time, go underneath both stitches, both legs of the stitch, and come over this side and pull. All right, so you can see I obviously haven't pulled very tight, so we want to actually get that solved right now. So go ahead and pull. I'm going to get this part and make sure that this is all lined up correctly. So let's go ahead and pull this part tightly. I like to get that first one in there real good. All right, so that's knit together. Now I can just pull it. Look at that. So once I pull that, you can see that it just looks like your regular ridge. It's really hidden. Isn't that nice? And when we turn it over, there's a bit of a ridge here. You can see a ridge, a seam. And that is going to be a nice, strong shoulder seam once we get it all in there and locked in. So you're going to go all the way down to here and then secure that in. All right, pause your video and meet me back up when you get to this end. All right, so I've pulled this part tightly, so now you can't see any of that yarn there. And you can see my stitch marker and where I last came up, or I actually went down through here. So I'm going to go back down where that stitch is there and go all the way through. All right. And then pull tightly, and then that ends that one. We're going to flip it over, and you can remove your stitch marker. And go ahead and I'm going to go through the back of that stitch there and make a loop. Go through that loop and make it secure. Okay, and then we can do that technique again down here. Through a couple of stitches and make a loop and secure, and then you can weave in this end here and then come back through and you can secure this end here as well. And you can see that it's not quite lined up, but that's actually because you need to work this tail in here. Once you connect this tail back around with this side, it actually will secure that in. Plus, it's actually going to get hidden in our armhole here. All right, so you're going to come down to this one and do the same thing. All right, so I'm going to flip around. And we're going to do that down here as well. Make sure I've got my bind off edges together. All right, so you're going to come around this side, make sure and get just the edge stitches and secure that in just as you did before, coming up through there. Make sure that tail is in there nice and secure. And come over to this side. And then repeat just as before, zigzagging across, picking up that knit stitch there, go into the other side, picking up that knit stitch there, and working your way and secure. So get those shoulder seams together, pause your video, and I'll meet you back up to work the armholes and sleeves. Once you have the shoulder seams done, you can see that you've got a neck hole created by only going halfway, so that looks really nice. And now we're going to add on the sleeves. So what I've actually done here is marked the midway point. That's not written into the pattern, but I think it's really nice because you can see where your stitches are going to line up. So I have an extra little stitch marker, if you can see that right there. And then you're going to take your 2 stitch markers here and measure from the seam down to the size that you need. You can also lay this on a hard flat surface and put it up here, and you can see where the width of this knit fabric is for the sleeves, where it's going to match up, because you're going to be sewing this here as well and the mattress stitch just like you did before, except you're going from the bind off area of this one to the side stitches on this one. So let's go ahead and turn it around, mark where your stitches go, and we're going to thread in with our needle. In this case, you will need some extra yarn with A. You can use it if you do have some yarn over here on B and you'll want to attach it here first. All right, so I've got this marked. I'm going to come up right where my stitch marker is. Yep, pull that through and leave a tail, and then go through that same one again and pull all the way through there and secure that. Go through this loop here. All right. All right, and then we're going to come up through the sleeve. Okay, and so like we did before with the blanket stitch, you will be working on the sleeve part that's on the right side, the V stitches that are facing that way, but on here you don't have that. So if you remember from the weaving technique, we have these sort of smiles, little umbrellas or top hats here. The edge stitch here, I see I'm going to move over one where I've got more of like an umbrella stitch here, so it kind of goes like this. And I'm going to select this one, but I actually am going to go right below it, and there's a stitch right underneath it. If you feel with your needle, you can feel there's a little stitch right underneath. So we're going to go under both of those stitches and pull through. So you want to make sure and get both. All right, you can leave that loose for now, and then come over right where you went below before. Sometimes you have to pull apart those rows. You've got the purl row right there. Okay, along the edge I had a little hard time. Okay, so pull that through and then go over to the other side again. You're going to go up to the purl row, grab that little arch that's up here, the umbrella, and go get the stitch underneath it as well. Pull through and go to the other side, and this next one should be easier. You can go down where you came before and go underneath those 2 stitches. Go all the way through, and then you'll be able to zip that up and close it off just as you did the other seam before. So continue going all the way down, and this little stitch marker here that I marked in the middle should fall right about where this seam is here. That way you know you've got everything sort of lining up correctly. And finish off as we've done before when you get down to this other stitch marker, and then repeat on the other side for your second armhole. Pause your video, I'll meet you back at that point. After your shoulder and armhole seams, you're now ready for the sides and the sleeves. So let's fold this in half here, and we're talking about these sides here and then the sleeves sewn together. So you can do the same stitch that you just did, and it will leave a ridge on the inside. This is the mattress stitch. Or you can work with the Bickford seam, which we'll do now, and it won't have an inside ridge, which is nice for a baby, and it won't be rubbing on them. It also is not as strong as this seam here. So for shoulders and the armholes, I recommend for sure the mattress stitch, and the Bickford you can use on the side here. All right, let's do that now. All right, you're ready to make the seam for this edge. We're going to work on the Bickford seam. We're going to be working the side and then the arm all in one fell swoop here. So I'm going to fold these over and get the side part together. Now I'm going to use a contrasting yarn here. If you used a contrasting yarn this other area and thought it was well hidden, that's fine. But on this one, I would suggest using the same colored yarn. You can get practice with an opposite color before you start if you want to. But when you actually do it, some of the yarn could be seen. So just to play it safe, make sure that you're using one that matches your project. So go ahead and attach your yarn, of course, or use a tail that's existing. And you're going to need enough yarn to undo the entire seam. All right, and then we're going to come over to this other side. We're just securing it just as we've done before. Okay. Now we're just working with top stitches, and we're working with these umbrellas or top hats and the smiles down below that make that little thing, and then they're going to join together. They're going to kind of lock together. So we're going to make them bring these two pieces and make this ridge look like it's stuck together. So we're going to go over to this other side and go up this side here, and you're going to see on this ridge it ends with an umbrella. So it's that part that goes up. So we're going to go up through this, just this top bump here, and then go ahead and pull that nice and taut. Then you're going to come over to this other side and find the smile. Okay, so this is the this part that goes like that right here. Okay, and then you're going to move over to the other side and go through this bump here, and it's going to make the part that we just did here with this little smile go with this little umbrella. And when I pull these two together, you're going to see them join. You see them come up like that and then join together. Now this extra part is going to be just kind of hanging out here right where this knit stitch should be, but these two are joined up. And we're going to come over to this other side, follow this ridge over here, and go through the little smile part, that little part there, and then go up to the umbrella, and then join those two together. And once you get it going, you'll see that they're connecting these ridges together really well. You're going to want to cinch it up as you go. You can also go through that part, and so the right side and the left side at the same time if you want to, and get those joined together. And make sure you don't miss a ridge. If you do, then it's not going to line up as properly. Okay, and you can see how this is joining up really nicely. Okay, so you're just going to continue all the way on this side seam and get up to right here where this seam is, and continue. You're just going still along the top, and then continue all the way down this arm here, and then join. If you have a harder time at this point here, you can always work your yarn to the back and then start your seam all the way from this arm inward this way, and then finish them up and tie them together to strengthen this part here. All right, I'm sewing up mine, and although I have this gray yarn in here, since I have my tapestry needle that's bright, maybe you can see this here, but I want to make sure and shore up this seam here where the armhole is, instead of just coming back and sewing in to reinforce. I want to try and do it while I'm going here now. Just make sure you've got it all zipped up here where all the seam is together. Don't pull too tight so it's bunched up, and make sure this is all completed. And then I'm going to come over to the right and grab a couple of stitches right before the armhole. So let's see, go through my little smile stitch here and here, and come over to the left, and let's see if I'll find one here, right here. I don't have as many to pull through because I had a little bit longer on this side. I'm going to pull through here and tighten that up. And then I'm actually going to go through the very last one that I just went through again. And then I'm going to go through the next couple of stitches on this armhole on this side, and then go over to the other sleeve and come up through this stitch here, pull through. All right, and then that is nice and tight and secure, and that seam is not going anywhere. And we'll come back on this side and continue going back and forth all the way down our sleeve. Pause your video. I'll meet you back up after you've finished the Bickford seam on both edges, on the sides and sleeves, both sides, and we will make the decorative blanket stitch border Okay, we're going to work the blanket stitch, and I've worked one of the sleeves here so you see what we're doing, and when you fold it down it's still going to have that great little effect on it, so you can choose to roll the sleeve or not. This is the same technique that's going to be used on the rest of it. I'm just going to use it on a smaller portion and show you how it connects. But when you work the rest of it, you'll just start in an inconspicuous spot, say like where the seam is, and then work your way all the way around. I kind of double over and make an extra stitch here. I'll show you that in a little bit. Work all the way down, work an extra stitch in the corner to make it diagonal, work all the way around a corner and down to a corner, and complete and finish it down here. So let's work this sleeve section here, and then later on I'll show you how to address one of these corners. Okay, so I'm going to find where the seam would be because this is a great spot to start. I'm going to go in the back of, let's see, 2 rows down. I'm going to go back, the back of one of these stitches, and just pull up, and then we're going to knot our, we're going to knot our work in the back, and then that way it stays, and just leave a nice little tail. And we'll address that at the end. Okay, go ahead and tuck your tail on the inside, and you can kind of just lay that down just so it doesn't get in the way. Okay, we're going to come up through the back of one of the columns here, and we've got our column of stitches right here. And this is going to be how long our stitch is. So from here to the top edge, this is how long you're going to see the stitch. And then you're going to go over to the next column and space it out. So the height of your stitch is going to be roughly the same length of your stitch up top. So let's go through the spot where we came out of last time. So go back here. And then we're going to draw up a loop. Okay, draw up a loop. And then go through that loop. And then it makes that stitch nice and tight there. Okay, so you're going to keep the length. Don't draw it too tight to where it squishes that down, but you're going to leave a nice little stitch to begin. And then we will complete this after we go all the way around. I'll show that part. So let me show you a few of these blanket stitches here. So we're going to go over a column and come up through the back of this next one here and leave a loop and come from the right to the left. And you can work right-handed or left-handed here. Just go through and drop that loop and pull the stitch. And if it's too loose on the top, you can go ahead and tug on this stitch down here and get that nice and straight and the length that you want, and pull it. And if this is the right length, then it works for you. If not, say I went down one stitch, you can see how you can undo that. So just go back, and I need to go down one more row for mine. So I'm just going to pull it out. All right, I'm going to go down one more row. There we go. And I'm going to leave a little bitty loop here, come from the back of it, and then pull up that stitch. And you can see it's more the same height. Okay, so now we know that we're going to go over one column and down 2 rows. So I'm going to go to the back here, go down 2 rows where I was, leave a loop, and go through that loop, and pull my stitch. And we want to make sure that these are right angles. So these are nice, straight, squared stitches. And then you just continue going all the way around. So I'll pause your video and I'll meet you back up for the end here and how to finish off your blanket stitch in the round. All right, we'll see you soon. We want to connect our blanket stitch, and I've worked the very last stitch here. And instead of coming to the back here, I'm going to go into the top of this blanket stitch, and you can see how all of these stitches are angled this way. So they're coming from the back and they're going around this direction. I want to mimic that, and so I'm going to come around the back of this stitch here. So right here. All right, and see how it mimics that? I want to make sure it's the same measured length, and then go around this side, go around that little column and kind of mimic that knot there that happens. So it draws up and makes that sort of knot like you've got in the other ones. And then I'm going to fold my stitches down, or my sleeve down, and I'm going to go into the back of this stitch here at the bottom, and I've got that lined up so it looks similar. I'm going to go all the way down here and put a knot in this one. There we go. So now that is completed. And then I'm going to take these two ends and then I'm going to work them into the back of my garter stitch, and they will be hidden. So I'm just going to go right up through the back of this column of stitches here, and no one's going to see that from the other side. I'm just working right alongside where my seam is. You see how that's just hidden in there really well. And then I can work over a few stitches and get it locked into position. And then cut it. And you can work all the way down further. And then do the same with this one as well. Work all the way down inside and then trim it. And when you're ready, you just flip over your sleeve and it has that nice finished look. So let's see what that looks like in here. All right, so you have your trim on your sleeves where it can fold over or lay flat. And then you want to work this middle section here and go all the way around and trim around the neck and down at the front and down at the bottom. So let's go ahead and address one of these corners now so that you can have a nice finished look here. You can go all the way around just as you were, but I think it has a nice finished look when it has a little diagonal on here. So let me show you how to do that now. As you can see, I've been working along. I started right here and wove in my tail, and then it worked along the edge and make a corner and come up all the way around. And so I have an outside corner and then I also have an inside corner. So I'm going to show you how to make that outside corner. The inside corners are very easy. You just make them all kind of compact here where it comes to the inside. So it kind of fans out. You have 3 stitches that are all kind of fanning out and positioning to one point. So that works out really well over here and here. Once I do one side, I can see where the 3 stitches are, and then the 3 stitches for my corner are, and then I know I have 4 stitches here, so I can match that over on the other side and kind of eyeball that. So once I get to the corner, I'm going to put my first stitch in and make sure that I've got the edge here, and then kind of go in one from there about the size of my stitch. I'm going to go back into the same spot that we came out of for the last stitch, pull through just like we normally would, except here is where you're going to position this yarn at an angle. So just move it over. Okay, and so it kind of gets at an angle here, like that. All right, and I'm just kind of put it into spot. There we go. And then when I get the next one in, it'll be able to be positioned again. So I'm going to come through that spot one more time. So 3 times for this hole. And then grab that loop in the back here. All right, and so now I've worked those 3 in that corner. You can see it kind of make this diagonal here, much like this over here. And then just keep going down and continuing on your stitches. And you may have to adjust it with your needle to get them positioned in the right spot. Let's do this next one here. I'll show you what I mean. So sometimes I'll just have to kind of pull it and adjust that loop. Once we get that kind of 4th one down here, you can see if you need to move these over, make sure that's all straightened up, because you won't be able to position them again later on because you'll be too far down. But see how both of these now look very similar and lined up? So you just continue working all the way around and then connect as we did on that sleeve. All right, I'll see you after you're finished. Well, here it is, the finished sweater. It's so adorable, and I think this blanket stitch really sets it off. Just to follow up, I wanted to give you some tips on the blanket stitch. It is, of course, a little bit tedious, but well worth it in the end. If you notice, the spacing on my blanket stitch is wider here and around the collar here, so around the neck and the front. Those are a little bit wider set, and then along the bottom edge of the sweater and the cuffs, they are closer together. So wherever you have these knit columns, it follows the knit columns, and where we have the garter ridge here, I just skip every other ridge. So there's kind of 2 ridges in between there. So that's really how I got the math to work out, and I think it looks really nice. Well, we really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial today. Be sure and click down in the comments below and let us know what you think and what you'd like to see next here at GoodKnit Kisses. Thank you again to Lion Brand Yarns for this yarn. We really enjoyed working with it today. It has a great hand to it, feels fantastic, and I'm sure the baby that gets this is going to enjoy it. Thanks for joining us today, where we help you stitch your love and love your stitches. See you again soon.